But you know what? I'd rather do it in Russian. So I'm Alexei Blagirev. I'm head of innovation at Oskritia Bank, and I'm one of those guys doing a white paper in master chain. Does anybody know what master chain is? Cool, cool. So you're all waiting for it. Good news. Any developers here? Could you please raise your hand if you're a dev? Okay, raise your hand if you're not a developer. Okay, better. Raise your hand if you know what blockchain is. Wow. Okay, well, now, if Dmitry Medvedev understands what blockchain is, well, everybody should. Now, this is pretty much my 5th speech on blockchain. So I'm going to tell you about the things we are doing at Oskritia, the kind of cases we have. We are actually a partner of Digital October for a blockchain. We have the plan of coming up with a totally unique content until the end of the year. So you shouldn't really be surprised if you see, our name again and again here, because we are supporting fintech, we're supporting blockchain, and we're running education programs together with Digital October. Now, I guess people present here today know all the key features of blockchain, so I won't waste your time by reminding you all that. So it all started with payment transactions, and this is where the fame of Bitcoin is coming from. But as a bank, we are primarily interested in KYC. Actually, blockchain started out as a B2B technology, however difficult it may be for some of you to sort of recognize, because we usually learn about blockchain as a C2C technology. There are cases of people out there that are sort of resistant, a Luddite, about the B2B applications of blockchain. They say, no way, that's a sort of profanation of the technology. So KYC, know your customer, this is where banks are coming from. This is what they care about in the blockchain world. But there are other potential use cases as well, such as taxation. There are several initiatives in this area. Well, for example, you can analyze total taxes payable based on the blockchain transactional data. Well, you may have heard about proxy, opting, and other voting systems. Notaries' work or notaries' jobs could be revolutionized using blockchain technologies as well. For some reason, people believe that blockchains and notaries are sort of they never meet. If you disagree, raise your hand. Okay, apparently others haven't made their minds yet. Actually, the two things can sort of meet for several reasons. Well, the job of a notary public, of a notary officer, of a certifying officer, if you like, is to decide whether you actually, are who you claim to be, and whether you're acting in sort of sobriety, and if you're filling your senses and control of yourself. And this is something a blockchain certainly cannot do for you. But all the paperwork for the notaries can actually be greatly supported with blockchain. IoT, another important area, well, Internet of Things, naturally, and you do understand that there are so many gadgets and sensors now attached to different bits of equipment. For example, here we have smoke sensors, for example. And blockchain here could be very useful in terms of creating a trusted environment. You can actually develop B2B insurance services. You may have heard about B2C insurance from Alpha Bank. So their idea was that, effectively the way it worked in 2013 was that, if you drove your car only in the city proper, total insurance would be something like 40,000 rubles for you. But if you ever use Moscow Ring Road, it would instantly go to 80,000 rubles. And telemetry services can actually be very useful in terms of enabling new financial services and products. Okay, we've done a number of projects at Akritia. Actually, we got 4 projects underway, and number 5 is under discussion. We started out with KYC project for blacklist, but we thought the blacklists were sort of boring, so we decided to go on a project called Citadel, covering dead people, apparently. Let me explain what the date is. So we started public databases, for example, databases of deceased people. And the problem with this database is that they're not entirely reliable. Quite often, you find faulty information there. According to the existing legislation in this country, we have to update and sort of verify our information every year. Quite often, internal rules and regulations of banks state that you need to update your information every 6 months, which means that banks usually have much more reliable information than, say, the state does. So we have this hypothesis that large banks tend to have much better quality data on their customers compared to, say, public sources. But how will 2 different banks exchange their information? Because it can easily happen they have different fields in their databases. One has 5 columns in a database and the other has, say, 12 columns. Well, there is a system called Single Client, developed by Human Factual Labs. This is actually a very strong Russian company. So what these guys do, they develop a sort of a decentralized MDM. So the way it works is that they turn attributes from a database into a Cartesian space, Cartesian array, if you like. Well, they will transform, for example, my passport data into a set of vectors, say 35 vectors. And then, every vector gets a weight assigned to it. And then they will compare this vectorized data from different banks. So we decided to use their technology, and in our application we call it digital fingerprint. Well, it's a Cartesian array, so, we're using hashes, SHA 256, I think, hashes. So I'm comfortable as far as, say, privacy is concerned. I'm comfortable. I believe, that not too much personal information will be leaked. So we decided to use 3 analytical attributes. One is fraudster, no fraudster, deceased or not deceased, and has there been any, sort of NPL history or not. And you know what? These 3 fields alone made it pretty useless for us to turn to credit history bureaus. Because, the moment we start this sort of interaction with the banks, we really don't need them. We actually propose that the Central Bank of the Russian Federation starts using blockchain for the same purpose, and they are considering it now. So that was the first successful case, and we performed the first transaction involving 5 banks in September last year. So we are producing a white paper now for Master Chain, and I believe that in the near future, it'll go into kind of a production test. Sberbank, Alpha, Tinkoff, Kiwi, and Akritia with the 5 participating banks. Now there is another project we're running, and I can't share many details with you. It's effectively a SWIFT-like system. Have you heard of BASP? Wow, well, this is sort of, I think it's a kind of a Russian equivalent of SWIFT. So we decided to try using a blockchain to support exchange of liquidity. You may wonder what kind of role blockchain can play for that. See, the functionality of SWIFT is in fact comparable to blockchain because, whatever goes into SWIFT stays there forever. It's impossible to destroy a SWIFT message, just like in blockchain. The only difference is in consensus. So we started wondering what consensus could be applied to here. So we came up with this concept that we called RDM, Reference Data Management. And we learn how to actually check the bank details of a particular counterparty through consensus. So we put this data down into the ledger, and then we use the same data to generate invoices. Well, that gives us significantly lower level of errors than what we have in our current business process. Because most mistakes in Swift are due to mistakes in, so to speak, internal reference books because they're outdated. So usually, if a payment doesn't go through, you have to revoke your earlier Swift order and issue another one. Well, next thing we did was to launch a payment system for individuals, and we're doing it together with a startup we're sort of affiliated with. It's effectively a direct debit project. So we have a standalone processing solution that enables direct access to customers' wallet, effectively. And we also have another project involving sale of airline tickets. We've done through the test stage already, but we're not really disclosing details at this stage. And the last case we had was a KYC questionnaire for banks. So when banks interact with each other, they need to exchange bits of data about who they are and what they do. We usually do it on paper, but we decided to use a smart contract developed by Akbar, which is a Tatarstan-based bank. So we had this pilot together with them and Sberbank. So we have tested 3 different blockchains in 4 projects. That was Ethereum, Hyperledger Fabric 0.6. I nearly went cuckoo on that project because it's still raw, Hyperledger, I mean. I'm really waiting for 1.0 because, what we saw was totally mind-boggling. And we also tried Bitcoin. So far, Ethereum is the undisputable leader. So if you guys probably know that Master Chain is a fork being developed for Ethereum. It's still under work, though. So we are going to develop this B2C project, which will have invoicing, KYC, end-to-end monitoring, and virtual POS all bundled into one. Well, you probably know that the payment market is, so to speak, overheated. Acquiring rates in Russia around 2 to 2.5%. Merchants want to pay even less than that because, after all, country is still in a crisis and margins are going down. Very often merchants tell us we are comfortable paying only 1%. And naturally, they are very much interested in alternative payments. Now, this does give rise to new projects quite often. It's the corporate division of a big bank that stimulates projects like this in big banks because they want to onboard new clients or they want to retain their old ones. Even if it can actually cannibalize your current operation. So this is what it will look like. So you've got those front-end systems that are integrated into the websites, and you can use RBS or Uniteller. So these are the well-known integration routines. And then this front-end service of the company talks to our back-end blockchain and will do, say, direct debit payments. And I've mentioned BSP for a reason, because we are the processing center for Rapida and several other payment systems. And we can actually do non-approved, so to speak, debiting through BSP if you know what I'm talking about. So the money then will go to a merchant bank, and usually money is dispatched as per a given schedule. And in fact, much really depends on what merchants want to have. It's subject to negotiation. The problem we often have with blockchain, I'm sorry, let me put it differently. It's a young technology, so there are so many problems, various diverse problems you may have with blockchain. I'm happy to see so many people interested in what blockchain can do for you. There is still no industrial standard, there's still no API for that. Unfortunately, we haven't come to any agreement with the other banks about how we can connect to each other's systems. That's why many banks come up with their own solutions. Well, if you are, say, a fintech project for blockchain, well, that means serious trouble for you, because for every customer you will need to develop various interfaces, various APIs. Now, we are trying to develop standards within our association, and Katya Frulovich is in charge of this standardization, and she's head of innovation at Sberbank, so I believe that by autumn this year, it will be clear which particular direction we'll take. Currently, cards are the only sort of ID we use in order to sort of authenticate a particular customer. But we are considering several other opportunities. You may have heard about a remote identification project. Okay, I see some people are nodding. Now, with a remote identification, you won't need to go to a bank office in order to, say, open an account. I know that some people are using similar services. Now in ICEA, that will be possible, and that way you will be able to use a non-bank related ID to, say, establish an account. There are also interesting cases of using your messengers, your IM services, or your smartphones for ID purposes. Well, because, say, Samsung Pay and what have you, are relying on this sort of authentication. Some banks are interested in that, but not many, though. So platforms you guys are creating are a sort of a marketplace, and it is best, if you want your marketplace to be popular, to sell it to the community of banks as opposed to individual banks. You'll need to negotiate or come up with the life hacks through a BSP or through associations. We've been talking a lot about smart contracts. Very little has been said about smart Oracle, and I think that Oracle is a very important component of your interaction with blockchain, because it will actually decide what kind of coding goes into the distributed ledger. I think it's very important to have some trendsetters who will tell us how to actually develop the right Oracle. You know, I keep hearing that you cannot really control the quality of data that goes into the blockchain, which is not entirely true. There are so many frameworks that will actually drive development of such an oracle. So an oracle that actually checks and verifies data going into the blockchain is a useful thing to have. All banks are pretty loyal now as far as access to accounts is concerned. There are some pilot groups running individual pilots in this respect. In our banking association, there are currently 12 banks. Most of them big guys, Gazprom Bank, Alpha, Tinkoff, Sberbank, VTB, all the big guys are there, actually. So talk to the FinTech Association, because they will be happy to test interesting new ideas in their ecosystem. That should be it for my speech. This has been a kind of an introductory presentation, really. If you have any questions, please ask, and thank you very much for coming.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to persist and continue speaking in English myself, and then you can answer in Russian. But do we have any questions from the audience right now? Yeah, there's one over there.
Она смотрит с других стран, да, еще?
Exactly, that's
Exactly.
why I'm pretending.
Exactly.
Очень
Hello,
короткая
everybody.
информация. А можно вот ваши контактные данные разместить для такого вот дальнейшего?
Would you like maybe to show them on the screen?
Я очень открыт к общению. У меня
I'm actually very open to communication. My email is so simple I didn't put it up. You can actually find me on Facebook. I promise to get back to you. But it's actually alex@open.ru. That's easy. Very easy to remember, really. So send your ideas, send your proposals there. I'll get back to you. alex@open.ru. That's it. Oh, that must have been your most important question. Cool. Ask me about the white paper.
Сейчас.
У меня вопрос не про white paper.
My question is not about the white paper. I understand about technical issues, but I'm wondering if your group has considered legal issues. Oh, absolutely. I understand that blockchain currently is out of sync with the Russian legislation. No, it's not the case. So guys working for IBM told us recently during the legal forum in St. Petersburg where Dmitry Medvedev mentioned the word blockchain 10 times. And I sat on the panel with Mr. Lubimov, who is Deputy Minister of Justice, and we did discuss blockchain and the role it is allotted under the legislation. So, a guy who is actually a legal advisor at IBM, he actually has a very interesting article on the current status of blockchain in the Russian legal framework. Actually, you probably know that the State Duma of the Russian Federation is considering a change in current legislation of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Well, I cannot really give you the details, but it's important for you to know that it's going to change the way cryptocurrencies work in this country. Can we already? Yes, you can already use it for sure. If we're talking about B2B cases, well, 383, Federal Law 383 deals with electronic document interchange. So, if you have a platform, and if you have rules stipulated for your association, that whatever happens on this platform is considered electronic document interchange, and if you spell out properly the same ideas in your ascension rules to this association, then you're fine. Isn't that a travesty of the whole idea of blockchain? Well, but say if something happens to one of the counterparties, doesn't it nullify all this document interchange? No. No, I don't think that public blockchains will exist the way we expect them to. Say, master chain is being developed as a closed network. Well, you shouldn't really confuse B2B with C2C. In a B2B case, you need to be perfectly sure you've properly identified the users. Otherwise, you're risking turning it all into the darknet. You know what? They're indexing darknet now. So be careful, guys. What I'm saying is that you should have somebody responsible for risk. And if you're talking to somebody, you must know who that person is. And that's also the position of the regulator. We need a sort of a regulator who cannot go bankrupt, who cannot go belly up, who will issue those IDs. Well, some people will feel it's a sort of cognitive dissonance, saying, how come this is open software? Well, that might sound cognitively dissonance-ish, so to speak, in the C2C world, but it makes perfect sense in the B2B world. Well, take the case of the DAO. You do remember what happened to the DAO. You've got this corporate procedure for money issuance for a parent organization if you are an investment fund. So the product owner and the legal guy decide on how they're going to issue the money. Then the devs are told to do this and that. And the devs tell him, that's exactly what I did. And, well, you know the rest of the story. Well, the business community and the lawyers have not developed a common language yet that would enable them to talk to the developers. When they're synergistic, this question will be gone. It is not really a legal challenge. It's just a matter of communication barriers between software engineers, businessmen, and lawyers.
One more question up here, I think, yeah?
И там еще, да? Блокчейн.
Спасибо за выступление. Алекс Куин, компания Maltap System.
I'm Alex Quinn. Where can I actually read your white paper? For Master Chain and for your airplane ticketing case. Unfortunately, we haven't published our white paper yet. It's actually not long, like 20 pages, long. And there is a reason for that. We haven't really described the case study in detail yet. We've explained how mining works, how redemption of fiat is gonna happen. Color tokens have been described as well. What kind of consensus algorithm we're using, whether it's sort of additional consensus possible. Alexei Arhip of Steam is doing it all now. I think they'll be finished by the end of June. So this case study should explain to people who are not in the know how you can apply this technology to real-life operations. You know, very often we need to explain that, we are not altruists. There are good business reasons for people to use blockchain. Yeah, but the business logic is that you have fewer counterparties and your transactions happen faster. Absolutely. Also, it's a distributed system, which means that it's more fault resistant. Well, for example, a central bank showcase their system for a sort of message exchange, and that was the big idea that they had a single point of truth, so to speak, and therefore the whole system was vulnerable to DDoS attack. And IoT now can mount really formidable DDoS attacks, so going distributed makes a lot of sense. Also, it decreases the cost per transaction. I'm not even mentioning the current prices of Bitcoins at $2,400. Yeah, well, Tinkoff charges 1% for acquiring. What do you think about it? When companies are offering acquiring rates well below the market average, all this means is that a particular bank here is subsidizing this operation. Well, I'm sort of envious of the extra profit they have in order to do that, but it has to be crystal clear they're making money on that.
A question over there. I don't know, there was some sound coming from here. Maybe you can raise your hand and then.
I have the question about your white paper, just like you asked. What kind of security model are you using? I understand it's a closed network. For Bitcoin, the usual model is that 50% plus of all the participants gotta be bona fide. In Master Chain, it appears that you expect all the participants to be non-fraudulent. And what kind of hash rate are we talking about in Master Chain? Oh, that's a good question. Thank you. In banking, you do not really trust everybody. You don't expect the participants to be non-fraudulent. But in order to be allowed into the network, you have to be a member of the FinTech Association. In order to join it, you have to meet several criteria. Like you need recommendations, you need to share the mission, the vision. Well, there is also a membership fee as well. At the same time, association members will be able to get access to Master Chain through an article, and will also be able to expose the services of Master Chain to external organizations. Which means that in mid-term, there is actually a risk here. So you believe that all those who have entered Master Chain are honest folks. With your permission, I'm not going to call them names, but you know what? They've gone through certain procedures and they share the risks. Do you think that they can actually mount attacks at you? Well,
Hey, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Let's give a warm hand of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.